Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome you on behalf of Global Ties Alabama to our Global Perspectives Institute. Our topic today is surviving mental illness issues locally and globally. And I think for those of us who follow the news and the trends ever since the pandemic hit the United States in 2020, there's been so much more of a focus on the topic of mental illness. Certainly, we've experienced, especially over this past weekend, celebrations, but also a lot of tragedy because of gun violence. And there's so many times that now the violence in our nation and around the world is attached to mental health issues. And so thinking about the state of mental health in the world and in America, I've learned that 1 in 7 globally have mental health disorders. And in the United States, we've seen a tremendous rise, 13% rise in mental health conditions, and certainly a worsening when you look at the statistics as we were impacted and led into the COVID-19 pandemic. So Global Ties Alabama is thrilled today to be able to gather a panel of experts who have spent time working in this field, providing interventions and support to our communities, both here in the United States and specifically in Jamaica, in the Caribbean. And so we're very appreciative of the subject matter experts who are with us today to provide some perspectives. I suspect that this will just be the beginning of a conversation, that we will have to continue to revisit this topic, dealing with it from different perspectives. And so I just want to appreciate everyone who's on the call today. We're very pleased to introduce Megan Nivens-Tannett, who will be serving as our moderator today. Megan is a strategic marketing expert, and she's a graduate of the University of Central Florida. And what I love about her background that has led her into being a business coach for the Catalyst Center, working with leadership, Greater Huntsville's class of 35, and she'll talk a little bit about that. And then incorporating her passion for people and finding solutions to problems, whether it's mentoring students, guiding nonprofits, helping her kids maneuver life's challenges. That in itself is a challenge these days, and working with clients to determine areas for growth and overall success. And so it's an honor for us to meet Megan and appreciate her involvement this afternoon as the moderator of today's panel. Megan, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. I'm thrilled to be here today. And, as she mentioned, this topic is definitely one that sits close to my heart, not only as an individual and a community citizen, but as a mom, as a business owner, as someone who is raising her kids, in a very unstable environment right now, which makes things very, very challenging. And as Jacqueline mentioned, we've been fortunate enough to not only be heavily involved in our community here in North Alabama, but also, put our money where our mouth is and try to do something about it. And I'm not sure, Jacqueline, would you like me to talk briefly about Recharge, or we want to kind of do that towards the end? Okay. So as Jacqueline mentioned, I've been a member of our community here from a business perspective for a long time. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of an organization that we have here called Greater Leadership of Huntsville. And this program is one that there's a variety of different subset programs underneath the leadership umbrella, but it allows individuals the chance to be fully engrossed in our community through a variety of different avenues, whether, that's understanding the culture, understanding the economic development challenges, you're just recognizing a variety of different elements within our community that perhaps you don't get a chance to see on the day-to-day basis. And each of the groups that go through this program, it's a year-long program, the one that I was involved in called Flagship. At the end of the program, each big group is broken up into individual small groups, and each small group is responsible for coming up with a community-based project that somehow ties in some of the lessons that you've learned throughout your time during leadership. And we were fortunate enough to have 2 of the 3 school superintendents as part of our flagship group this year, which really gave us great insight into our local area school system. I have a 17-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old that are in elementary, middle, and high school right now. The pandemic was not a lot of fun, really, taught me how to maneuver things that frankly, I did not know how to do. And so I absolutely gained a newfound respect for not only for our teachers, but just for the education system as a whole. But going through this program, there was a lot of discussion around the challenges that are occurring and unfolding on a daily basis within our school system. And of course, naturally, there is a lot of discussion around the support that's needed for our local area students. But what we found is that there wasn't a voice that was loud enough talking to support the teacher perspective. So we really wanted to address, the mental health and wellness within the educator community to be able to support them in ways that we felt they weren't being supported. So a lot of our small group projects, you'll find things like, small groups will raise $60,000 to build a series of wheelchair ramps at particular facilities, or they will, host a family, a foster family, and provide them with some items that they might need to be just a better equipped family to foster young kids, or they'll, fundraise and write a check to an organization or local area nonprofit that needs it. And so our small group project we called Recharge. And what it is it's an online resource that allows an online resource that's designed for teachers. And I'm going to share this with you guys real quick and just share my screen. So this is what the Recharge program looks like. So we built this website in partnership with Wellstone, who you'll hear from Jeremy in just a moment. His organization was phenomenal to partner with. So we partnered with Wellstone. And we also partnered with a private counseling practice here called Solid Ground Counseling. And what we did was we created a series of videos. And these videos were tailored to individual teachers and the unique needs that they have as educators, especially that have surfaced and unfolded over the last couple of years. So we did a series of different videos that the teachers can be able to, they can be able to take part in. We also provided a variety of different resources here that are being curated. So for example, like the best of TEDx, if you've ever watched a TEDx talk, there's a lot of topics on there around mental health and mental wellness and, ways to cope with stress and anxiety and things of that nature that we felt were really relevant for educators. And then we also were able to secure a partnership with 10% Happier. And 10% Happier is an app that you can download that really helps you understand mindfulness and deal with stress in very positive and uplifting ways. It's a paid app, but we were able to secure free subscriptions for all educators within our area. The way they can be able to, just focus on themselves and be able to find ways that they can cope with some of those challenges that otherwise might be really hard. We did think about doing something inside the classroom, but we really wanted this to be a tool that they could leverage wherever they were at any time and not restrict them to have to be in the classroom and it be one more thing that's going to pull them away from the important things that they have to do on a day-to-day basis. So I will say, 10% Happier is a very, very well-known brand. all we had to do was ask, and they gave this to us for free. So they have obviously recognized the dire need that educators are facing on a daily basis, and they were more than happy to provide these free subscriptions to educators in our area, which is phenomenal. And we also just feature a lot of different, resources here again that educators can use. So this was a program that, we launched as part of our leadership program. I was so honored to be able to present this to our team. Of course, leadership program has a start and an end date. And although our leadership class has already graduated, my intent personally is to maintain and sustain this ongoing resource of Recharge. That way our educators will consistently have resources available to them. And we're actively looking for sponsors to be able to support this and help this be something that can be sustained long term, but also be something that can be adopted within school systems, not only in North Alabama, but anywhere. Because as we know, this information is absolutely relevant, beyond just the zip code that we live in. So that is sort of my avenue of coming into today's panel, is that not only is this something that's of great passion for me personally and professionally, but something that our organization here locally and within our community is also very passionate about. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. So you've got it. The URL is rechargeourteachers.com, and I'll drop the link in the chat box so everybody has that. Please feel free to share this with any resource that you think may need it. Again, this is something that is relevant for everybody, not just educators, but anybody, whether they live here or they don't. So with that, I'm honored to be here. I really appreciate the time, really appreciate everybody taking out the time of their day to talk about such a critical topic. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jeremy Blair, who's with Wellstone. And Jeremy, he's the CEO of Wellstone, which is a community mental health center based here in Huntsville. For those that don't live here, you may not know this, but they are building a very, very phenomenal world-class facility here in Huntsville, which has been very eager. The community is very eager to see this unfold because Wellstone has provided such phenomenal resources here in our community. I'll let Jeremy talk a little bit more about that. But a little bit on him, he earned a BS in psychology, and he has a master's in marriage and family therapy from Harding University and an MBA from the University of North Alabama. He's worked in the nonprofit behavioral healthcare system for the last 22 years, serving children, adolescents, and adults who suffer from mental illness and substance use disorders. Jeremy also serves on the board of Life South Community Blood Center, a partnership for a drug-free community, the Association of Marital and Family Therapy Regulatory Board, and Happy Health. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Jeremy, thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan. It's great to be here. Appreciate the introduction and kind words. Wellstone, like Megan said, is a community mental health center. And so we service Madison County and Coleman County currently. And we take that community part very seriously, meaning that we look for how we can partner with other entities within the Madison County and the Coleman County areas. And so as a part of that, we do a lot of things that maybe your typical mental health provider may not do, but we see it as very important in plugging those gaps when we see those in mental health. And so one of those big gaps that we started working on in 2018 was a crisis diversion center. And so that's the new building that Megan referenced. So we are, currently in Madison County, there are 32 inpatient adult beds, and those are all housed at Huntsville Hospital, and they stay full. And so, but not everyone needs hospitalization per se. And so we really look to find that gap that was there when police officers or community members had really two options, jail or the emergency department. And we really felt like there needed to be a third option in this crisis center. And so we worked with legislators and the Commissioner of Mental Health, and were awarded the first of 3 diversion centers back in 2020. And so in May of 2021, we opened a temporary operation for our diversion center, but we always knew we wanted to build a ground up design specifically for this purpose facility. So we are finally wrapping up. I don't advise building a 25,000 square foot building in the midst of COVID, but we are finally wrapping up that project. Hope to be open probably in the next 2 months, 2.5 months. And we will effectively double the number of inpatient beds in the county. So we're excited about that. And we also last month or 2 months ago announced that we will be breaking ground on a pediatric crisis center wing within the next year. The reason for that is in Madison County, HIMSI transports 800 youth a year out of county for psychiatric stabilization. 400 of those go to Decatur West, typically, which is over in Decatur, operated by Huntsville Hospital. But unfortunately, another 400 will go as far as Birmingham, Mobile, Dothan, sometimes Nashville, Chattanooga. And so again, back to that theme of finding those gaps and figuring out how do we meet those needs, we felt very strongly that we needed to open a program here in Madison County. So hopefully, depending on how long construction takes, by maybe 2024, we should have that facility open and ready to go. But Wellston as a whole, we operate 66 different programs. A lot of those programs do not happen on our campus here on the Parkway. A lot of those happen in the community. We're, really have a lot of different teams, whether they're in-home teams or other specialized teams that go out into the community, meeting with clients where they are, meeting with family members. We do have a school-based mental health program where we're placing therapists in Madison County schools and Huntsville City schools. And so we've got about 50 therapists that we employ that their office is whatever school that they're assigned to. And, we continue to look at what are those needs, what are those gaps, and how can we continue to be a community partner to the Madison and Coleman County areas. So we continue to look at that. As mentioned previously, mental health has really gotten a lot of attention over the last couple of years because of the pandemic, but also I think because of the stigma of mental illness and mental health treatment has finally eroded a little bit. I think the pandemic probably, if there's anything good that's come out of the pandemic, I do think that's a piece of it where people are recognized that, it's not an us and them, it is a we when it comes to mental health challenges. And we continue to reach out to our neighbors and understand that you may not have mental health challenges personally yourself, but the chances are very high that someone in your family or someone in your circle will at some point in their lifetime experience a mental health challenge. And that's no different than any other medical condition that someone may face. And, we continue to really see that advancement, and we're glad to see that. The challenge with that is at a time when people are seeking mental health care more than ever, just like other sectors, the workforce for mental health has probably never been worse in terms of having the availability of staff to meet those needs. But, I'm encouraged as we continue to focus on mental health, we focus as a state on investing in mental health and understanding that these healthcare workers that deliver these mental health services each and every day are valuable members of our society, valuable members of the healthcare industry as a whole. And I feel like we will continue to make progress there. So, and pivoting a little bit, we've been thrilled to host Chevelle. Gotten to know her over the last 5-6 weeks. And even before that, as we were kind of going through the exploratory phase, she is a bright young lady with a bright future. I believe as she continues to look at what she wants to do in the Caribbean, she has really been able to come here, look at what we're doing, look at all the different programs that we have to offer, how we market those programs, how we develop our community relationships, how do we generate referrals, and really kind of take a look at all of that. She's been really interested in a lot of different areas, and I'll let her highlight those. But I think this has been a great partnership for Alabama Global Ties, and we are just proud. This is our first time participating in this program. So, we were happy to be able to accommodate Chevelle. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chevelle, I think. Is that right, Megan? And let her go from there.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chevelle Campbell. I am a wildlife fellow from Jamaica, and my area is mental health and mental wellness. I'm a therapist there in Jamaica, and I do predominantly group sessions, and I do my sessions mostly in nature. The name of my business is Walk Boat Picnic, which is Jamaican for a child who likes to walk about. Because in my programs, I use a lot of activities and experiential ways to get messages across and help people to cope through mental health challenges. So just a little preview in terms of mental wellness. So my approach to mental health is a little bit different. And I'm so thrilled. Like, even though I came into a very typical mental health environment, I have grown so much the time I have been here at Wellstone. So in Jamaica, the statistics say that 1 in 4 Jamaicans will experience a mental health challenge at any given time. Unlike here, where people know or may know that they need help, or they're referred and they just willingly come to Wellstone or go to any of the other organizations, in Jamaica there still is a very big stigma around mental health, and there's a lot of discrimination in organizations, in schools, in just every aspect of life, basically, and that has affected how people work through challenges. As some of you may know, there is a crime problem, and the link between crime and mental health, there is actually a very strong correlation. Currently, I oversee about 15 projects that work with young people, like children and young adults, who are exhibiting criminal or pro-criminal behaviors. And we're in the program where we're using the activities that I use mostly grounded in CBT, which is trauma, cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as trauma-informed care, to create behavioral modification for these young people. And through working with these young people, and I've been doing that for the past 10 years. I'm not as young as I look. So one of the things that I've found is that there is a lot of trauma. And with all of that trauma, and there's also a lack of avenues to express and to properly cope. So you find that people find maladaptive techniques to cope with those traumas: the excess drinking, the smoking, risky sexual behaviors, and there is a lot that forces them to start looking at themselves as not worthy, and that leads to other things like a lack of hope. And a lack of hope is something that I think, when you speak to people who are struggling with depression, some people who are struggling with anxiety, it's just that they fail to see that it can get better. And as mental health professionals, we like to tell people it gets better. So my techniques was really to have people do therapy without realizing that they're doing therapy. So they're in nature. For example, with the healing circles, when I work with young women who have been sexually abused, and we are going through, the program, we tend to do those by the seaside or by the beach or by a river, where it's nice, where it's calming, where they feel safe. And I find that through play and through fun activities, because they think sometimes a lot of fun. There's the hard parts where you have to journal and talk about the things that really make you uncomfortable. But it in my context, it really does promote more open discussions when they're done this way. And that's why my model is unique. But in terms of scaling and additional programs, I have been learning so much from Jeremy, because in Jamaica, we normally when they're teens and start becoming problematic, that's usually when we grab them and like, come into this program, it would be good for you. But here at Wellstone, they have the Nova Center, which deals with children, and they grab them as early as 3 years old. So if they're not showing healthy coping techniques, or when they have like behavioral challenges, or they're just not coping well, the Nova Center is here, and it has group therapy sessions with them, and everything is helping them to grow and providing coping skills and techniques that will help them to maneuver whatever challenge life throws at them at an earlier stage. And through talking to Jeremy, I've realized that the success rate for that program so far, I think they're pretty outstanding. And that's definitely something that I would want to model and to include in my program offerings at the end of this fellowship. There is as well substance abuse, and how the group substance abuse sessions are done with even the adolescents and adults. And one of the things I realized here, I really love that adults are treated differently and in a different environment, and different techniques are used for the adults, for children. And there are some things that I've even learned, like, so Jeremy has taken me on the construction side over by the new crisis center, and I had my little hard on, and just to see some of the things. So I don't really work with patients who have manic disorders like depression, like schizophrenia, bipolar. I deal with more behavioral challenges and depression and anxiety, ADHD, etc. But in Jamaica, we have one mental health hospital, and it's currently closed. And it's really a joy to see how Wellstone has managed to keep its doors open. Jeremy has not spared anything in terms of how the place is operated and managed. Everything from finance to marketing to promotions, those whatever questions I ask, the answers are always there, even if they're difficult answers, and it's a difficult conversation to have sometimes. Well, he makes it easy, makes it comfortable, and I've been learning a lot. One of the things I mentioned earlier is that I do a lot of play in my work. And one of the things I told Jeremy I wanted to get out of this fellowship is to learn a little bit more about trauma-informed care, since I'm leaning more towards that because of the high cases of trauma that I'm seeing in Jamaica. And some of the things I don't know, like a lot of people from African descent probably have similar things, like, and you're from the South, so you know that people believe that a good popping solves everything. The child's misbehaving, you get them a quick pop. And in Jamaica, sometimes it's not one pop, but it's pop, 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 and it's hitting, and it's very, things that people believe, the child steals, you push their hand and fire, you're like, oh, you know how it burns, you're not going to steal again. But then there becomes a trauma associated with that. And it's not always a lesson. The lesson's not always learned the way you intend. Sometimes they're like, people hurt you because you do something. Think about better ways to hurt them back. And then we don't want that. So I've learned so many things since I've been here. Jeremy has given me the opportunity. So I've been telling him, Jeremy, I want to learn more about trauma-informed care and play therapy, and I'm not seeing this at Wellstone. And he has been a gem. Jeremy has, like we drove about 20 minutes to the National Children's Advocacy Center to get to see play therapy that was grounded in trauma-informed care, and they call that technique TFCBT, and they have a couple others that are just grounded in trauma-informed care and play therapy, and those have been wonderful and amazing. I was so excited when I went there, and definitely pushing in more in that direction. So coming here, my business was very much in the startup stage, and I was still looking for the narrative in terms of branding and so on. And right now I am very clear as to how I want to move forward. And I want to thank Jeremy and the team here at Wellstone, because it's really a team environment. Everything to make my life easier, they have been doing. So Yeah, so those are some of the learnings that I've gotten. I've now even have information on how to manage my own wellness center. So if one day I wake up and decide that, hey, I'm gonna take Bellevue up into my hands and operate that. I don't have an MBA like Jeremy, but I've learned a lot from him and know that I have his guidance even after I leave here, to help me chart the way forward since he's been doing this for 20 plus years. So that's pretty much my presentation. And if you have any questions, you can start writing them down while I hand over back to Megan, who is the moderator. Megan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Cheval. That's so interesting. So I actually have a couple of questions for you, just based on some of the things that you mentioned. So um, with this fellowship, I mean, if you could, and I know there's a lot of different things that you covered based on kind of comparing some different therapies, and there's obviously different resources, here that may be available that may not be available to you, and vice versa. What would you say are, and I know you're not done just yet, but I mean, if there are 3 key takeaways from what you've learned here with your time that are sort of these aha moments for you that you might be able to, tangibly impact, when you get back to Jamaica, what would you say those 3 things are? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Well, I'm on the spot and I'm in the hot seat, so I was ready. One of the things I would want to say is patience. To tell people to have more patience. Patience to the mental health practitioners who are currently trying out many different forms of therapies to see what works. Also patience to persons who now have different mental health challenges that are coming up. And I would want them to just trust the process. For me, as a therapist coming here, I've had to learn how to be patient because, I was doing what I was doing, but I still didn't have a clear path. But one of the things I decided when I was going to start this was that I was going to be patient in this process, learn as much as I could. And in the process of that, I find that things usually work out. Once you're working with a set program that is there, if it's technique, it's if programs, or it's in the case of myself here now with Jeremy, it's a mentor. I would say patience. Second one, I would say have an open mind. So when I came here, I was sharing with Jeremy and I was sharing with Jocelyn, something that I do in my therapy. So when I'm working with young people, for example, and they are going through, for example, they are having a hard time just coping. And I give them a set of tools and techniques and they're using it. I give them a plant. It's usually like a pepper plant or a tomato plant. And it's something usually that I grow and then put them into little pots. And based on how I see them take care of the plant, because I ask for a weekly update on the plant. The plant is doing well. I know that they're doing well. If the plant's not doing so well, I know that they're not sticking to the treatment plan that I provided. And I was sharing that with Jeremy, and I realized because Jamaica is a tropical island and, we love outside, using more outside time. And I was sharing that with Jeremy and he was like, well, it's hot, but there are definitely some things from that we could incorporate. So he was willing to learn from me. I typically don't like hospital type settings. To me, they feel cold and impersonal. But I was like, all right, I'm going to go to this place. And after looking up Wellstone, I'm like, this looks like a hospital. But when I came here and I realized how the community rooms were set up for the adults and how the rooms were set up for the children, it was not that cold environment that I was expecting. They really made it homely. They really made it like very friendly and open, and you'd want to be in that space. And I thought that was particularly important because if I had closed my mind off, the experience and how I would choose to interact with Jeremy and the environment would be different if I had a closed mind. So he's willing to learn from me. Jocelyn supervises me. and she's been willing to learn from me. Right now, they're asking me to help Kayla with, writing some behavior modification and adherence methodologies for some of the patients at some of the group homes. So they're using some of my expertise while I'm learning from them. So the second one, be open. Third one, be present. I can't overemphasize that. Being here, like right now, I'm actually on leave because I'm supposed to be working, but whenever I'm doing a lot, I realize that, I don't want my attention to be divided. So in Jamaica, I just sent them a little note and I'm like, you'll be getting me back in 2 weeks. I won't have that much time for you because there's so much I'm getting. I've been here and just observing everything that's happening. And I'm like, so Jocelyn, I heard them talking about something called SAMA. And she's like, oh, that's how we, keep ourselves safe without hurting the clients. And I'm like, that's not a thing. And she's like, yeah, that's a thing. In Jamaica, it's a little bit different because for anything at all, especially if you're having manic outbursts, or even if you just say, oh, I'm going to kill myself or whatever, there is not like an isolation room like they have at Wellstone. So for everything, they restrain you. And it's belts on your hands and feet. And usually if the client is going to attack you, the aim is to always protect yourself. But it's okay if they get hurt in the process. Jeremy ensured I got free SAMA training, and I actually got certified in SAMA. And this was a new technique that protects both the helper and the client. So as the therapist, you're not getting hurt and the client's not getting hurt too, because sometimes in that moment, they have no control over their actions. And I thought, wow, what if I was otherwise busy? And like Jeremy can agree with me, I think I've seen everything that there is to see here at Wellstone because I try to be present. Whenever I'm there, I try to learn what's happening. MD's iPhone, I saw a hand raise. Yeah. Oh, that's not a hand raise. That's my cursor. Sorry. So yeah, if there is anything that's happening, I try to see it in the moment. If I have questions, I write them down and ask. And my questions are usually answered and answered in a way which satisfies me. So I would say, yeah, be open, be present. Yeah, and definitely just have some patience in what you're doing because we're all trained professionals. And sometimes it doesn't seem like things are working the way we want them to, but yeah, we just need to trust the process, trust our colleagues with an open mind and be present. And
I love that. I love that. Well, and I think that's not only are those three, areas of focus so critical to the practice that you are in, but to everyday life as well, just being able to really be in the moment and be mindful of what's around you and to trust the process, especially when you've got a lot of individuals who are working towards the same thing, us being able to share some of those learnings and, share what works, what doesn't work is critical to ensure that we all move forward in the right direction. So thank you so much, Cheval, for sharing that. But before we move on, just how much longer do you have here in North Alabama?
Oh, this is my final week. Next week I go to DC. Yes.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure having you here, even though I haven't personally met you. I hope you've enjoyed your time.
I have.
It's been very, very hot. So for those that don't live in North Alabama, it's been pretty toasty here. So, but we appreciate you spending time with us. So to showcase just a slightly different, different side of this topic, definitely want to turn it over to Stephanie. And Stephanie represents she's here with the National Association of Social Workers. So talking in a little bit of a different angle on this particular topic. But Stephanie, she's a licensed master social worker with an academic background in international mental health, military social work, and social policy. She currently works with individuals suffering from anxiety, depression, and substance use disorders. And she has visited a total of 38 countries with a focus on learning how other cultures handle mental health crises. So it'd be interesting, definitely, to hear from Stephanie's perspective. So Stephanie, thank you again so much for joining us today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And it's so wonderful to be here. Thank you, Chevelle. I really appreciated your perspective on therapy from a trauma-informed perspective and being from Jamaica, I really like that. And thank you, Jeremy, as well. We have a lot of our members of the National Association of Social Workers in Alabama who work at your facility and have great things to say. We really appreciate the work that you guys do at Wellstone. So I was asked to speak about the current challenges that some social workers are facing locally, nationally, and globally. And the thing about being a social worker that I'd really like to focus on is that we take mental health and we look at the socioeconomic perspective of it and really focus and hone in on it. That's what we're trained to do. And we focus on what's happening in our world and how that relates to mental illness. So currently, we all know we're facing a mental health crisis, clearly resulting from COVID. We had a lot of social isolation. We're in the middle of an opioid epidemic. We have a war going on in the West. So there are some serious traumas occurring in our nation and globally that people are suffering from on an individual level. In 2015, the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare highlighted 12 challenges for our profession that we are ethically bound to tackle on the national, local, and global level. And I will drop the link in the chat for these grand challenges at the end, but you can find them online. And basically these challenges are things that we found in our profession on a global scale that we cannot seem to tackle. One of them being ensuring a healthy development for all youth. Clearly during COVID and that crisis, we could not ensure a healthy development for our youth, especially on an academic level and a social isolation level. So that was something that we've really encountered lately that had a drawback. Next being closing the health gap. Social workers are really in charge of making sure that all citizens and people and everyone in the world has access to proper care, medical care and mental health care. This is something that we continue to find a challenge with nationally and globally as well. We cannot seem to fill in those gaps for healthcare coverage. The next one is stopping family violence. This is something that we can't put social workers and mental health professionals in everyone's home and to keep everyone safe. This is something that we're continuing to tackle on a global level, and we desperately ask our government for help protecting our families and to help protecting women specifically on a global scale from abusers and domestic violence offenders. The next one is advancing long and productive lives. Now, this one for me has always been a very broad challenge. I'm like, how am I supposed to, as a social worker, help advance a long and productive life? Well, one of the ways is by promoting on a policy level paid family leave. People should have access to lives outside of their work, and people should be able to find gratification things outside of their jobs. So that's something that we take into consideration as social workers for a mental health perspective. Next is eradicate social isolation. This is something that even before COVID, we've had an issue with. People are very isolated. People do not feel like they can connect with other people. So this is something that the Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare really challenges us and says, hey, we've got to fix this if we want to fix mental health issues in our nation. Next is end homelessness. I'm sure you can imagine that if you're homeless, you have a hard time dealing with depression, anxiety, or other mental health issues. This is something that we as social workers say we cannot fix mental health until we fix this person's housing situation, because that's a stressor, and that stressor will continue to exacerbate those symptoms. Next, we have create social responses to a changing environment. Now, for this could mean a various number of things, but according to the International Federation of Social Work, we're currently using this challenge to tackle climate change. Yes, climate change can be a mental health issue, and especially in certain areas of the world where climate change really does impact daily living. So we as social workers and as mental health professionals really have to work to find new ways to intervene with individuals and families who are suffering from mental illness that is exacerbated by climate change. Next, we have harness technology for social good. This is something that we really did tackle really well during the COVID-19 pandemic, as we saw an increase in telehealth and we saw an increase in medical providers and insurance companies really being able to pay for and utilize telehealth. This is something that we count this as a win for mental health for sure. And number 9 is promote smart decarceration. Incarceration is definitely a mental health issue across the world. So we as social workers promote the idea that decarceration means rehabilitation. Instead of incarceration, we rehabilitate and restore lives rather than putting people in jails and in prisons. And we believe that these settings are not meant to help those suffering from mental illness. If anything, it's a stressor and it makes those symptoms worse. Next is to reduce extreme economic inequality. We believe as social workers that if you are under the poverty level and suffering from poverty, homelessness, lack of food, or anything like that, you do not have the means to sustain healthy lifestyle, including mentally healthy lifestyle. So therefore, we say as social workers, we cannot help this person become mentally fit unless they are living at an adequate rate. 11, build financial capability for all. This kind of ties into the last one. If you cannot financially sustain yourself, you cannot mentally sustain yourself. If you cannot provide for yourself and for your family, that is a stressor and it exacerbates mental health symptoms. And this is something that we're tackling across the globe when it comes to poverty and people who do not have the resources to financially sustain themselves. And lastly, achieve equal opportunity and justice. This means that if those who do not have opportunities to succeed will not succeed, that means they will not succeed mentally either. So we use evidence-based methods to project hope in schools and things like that, that address disproportionate opportunities and give everyone opportunities to succeed. So equity is something that we're really trying to promote and struggling with tackling on a global scale. So those are the 12 grand challenges for social work. And while they may not seem like mental health issues, they 100% are. And that's what we're trying to focus on as the National Association of Social Workers when we practice mental health. Another organization I really want to highlight is the International Federation of Social Workers. This is a global body for our profession, and that means that we have social workers in pretty much almost every country, especially in all Western countries. Social workers are used for a number of things, but right now the International Federation is focusing on climate change and how it's affecting mental health and social services across the world. They're developing new evidence-based methods to address mental health and depression and anxiety over climate change. And this is something that the National Association of Social Workers is really planning to dive into in the next year or so. So that is all I have for what challenges we're facing as social workers. If anyone has any questions or anything like that, I'd love to take them, and I will put those links in the chat.
So Stephanie, I actually had a question, and maybe this will, if anyone else has got something as well, please do, chime in. But as individuals, as business owners, as community citizens, as parents, what can we do to help support those 12 areas that you talked about? I mean, it obviously casts a very broad spectrum, each of which has these subset of challenges within them that just have rippling effects, forever. And, I think about it, and unfortunately, I think about, when you get around the dinner table with family sometimes during the holidays and conversation, takes a spin. It's like, do not talk politics, do not talk this, because you never know where it's going to go. But to the example about decarceration and talking about, on one hand, why would we want to continue to fund, and pour more dollars in, yet on the other hand, it's like, why wouldn't we? I mean, if we've got an audience that is clearly in particular need, or some of those individuals are clearly in particular need, what can we do to help them, do a hard reset and be able to get the resources that they need? That way they can turn things around. So, I mean, what can we do as individuals, as community leaders, as parents, as this and that, to help reinforce some of those things?
Well, with the NASW, we strongly promote issue-based politics and not partisan-based politics. So civic engagement is very important. We want to promote legislation and bills that fund things like Wellstone, that fund community mental health practices. We want to push for decarceration for the purpose of mental health, not for the purpose of partisan politics. So at the global level as well, we want to see global initiatives like the International Federation of Social Work pushing for mental health services for victims in Ukraine. We want to see that happening. That's civic engagement that is not party-based. That is just your social work, your mental health professional values at the civic engagement level.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay. And here's just another question, if you don't mind, Stephanie. If you could speak to the shortage of social workers in Alabama, and what is being done from your perspective, if you can shed light on that, what is being done working with universities to help overcome that shortage?
Yes, so that is something that has been long lasting for sure. We definitely have a shortage of social workers, and we're one of 5 states that has a severe shortage. So what's being done with universities is we have 2 universities per year that are planning to roll out an accredited program. We cannot guarantee those programs will be rolled out because they have to meet those accreditation requirements. However, we do have plans to provide those resources for those universities. And that's over the next 5 years. Next, we also are pushing at the legislative level for higher pay for social workers, because according to the national statistics, social workers leave the profession after 5 years because of lack of pay and being overworked. So then we also are pushing for legislation that provides paid family leave, things like that, so that our social workers are not getting burnt out. So yes, we have several initiatives, especially at the national level. These things are not being ignored. It just takes some legislators who actually care about us as professionals, not just social workers, but mental health workers as a whole.
Right, right. I've often heard that comment being made just in this community alone, which I'm sure, represents the broader picture of, those who go into social work definitely do not do it for the pay. And the reality is that we need to make money to survive, so, I mean, it's just devastating to think that it's something that critical is being depleted due to something, and when you look at other industries that are completely inflated, in the wrong direction, it's just, it's devastating to see unfold. So, okay. Well, thank you so much. You're obviously doing amazing things with what you're doing, Stephanie, and really appreciate your perspective and all that you do. It's obviously, there's a big road to go down, and, lots of challenges, but it sounds like, you guys are on your way, and we're just happy to be part of the discussion. That way we can learn how to help. So, well, if there aren't any additional questions, Jacqueline, I'll turn it back over to you. Again, we appreciate everyone's time and really appreciate the conversation. There's a lot to be done, but I think we've got, you get the right people in the room. There's no limit to what we can achieve if we just continue down that path. So, Jacqueline, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Megan. This has definitely my vision for this discussion has been realized and exceeded expectations. And really, if you remember at the beginning, I said, we'll have to have a follow-up. There's no question. We just touched the surface of issues here, but I just want to appreciate our panelists, our moderator, and there's so much more that we need to learn and understand about this topic. I would encourage everyone to look at the 2022 State of Mental Health Report in America, and also similar reports that have been done by the World Health Organization. Lots of what we heard this afternoon were touched on. We know that also the refugee issue in our countries have also increase the need for mental health services. I'm so excited. Remember that this recording will be sent to each of you, and I would encourage you to send it to your stakeholders. I have a granddaughter who's a new social worker in Akron, Ohio. I'm obviously concerned about her with what's going on in Akron, but I know that she will be blessed by this this panel discussion. So I want to thank all of you and appreciate the partnerships with each of you and your organizations, and stay tuned for future Global Perspective Institutes. Have a wonderful afternoon.